In June 2025, something strange happened. Google rolled out a significant update to how it ranks local businesses. It was a huge deal. Businesses across almost every industry saw their Google rankings, and as a result, their revenue take a hit overnight. At that point, we were working with a lot of small businesses, HVAC companies, plumbers, home service businesses, and almost every single one of them felt it, except our dental clients.
Never tell me the odds.
Every dentist we worked with either held their rankings or actually improved, and all of them continued to bring in more and more revenue. At first, we thought, okay, maybe that's a coincidence. Maybe they just got lucky, or we just got lucky with a few accounts. But as we started digging into why, we found something none of us expected. Dentists weren't just surviving this Google algorithm update. Dentists had a set of structural advantages in the current digital landscape that almost no other business had. Advantages that, if understood and taken advantage of, make the path to sustainable practice growth obvious. So we dug deeper, we kept pulling on that thread, and what we found underneath wasn't just a marketing story. It was a much bigger story about an entire industry that had quietly been losing ground for years, and no dentist we've talked to fully understood why. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and more importantly, once you understand what's actually happening, the path forward becomes clearer. So, let's rewind. For most of the last century, dentistry did something that most professions never pull off. It built a completely independent business model outside of the hospital system, outside of corporate medicine, and largely outside of the insurance industrial complex that governs most healthcare. And it worked. Dentists figured out how to be both highly skilled clinicians and effective small business owners, and for a long time that combination was effectively untouchable. You got the clinical prestige of being a healthcare professional with an advanced degree. You got the financial upside of owning your own business, and you got flexibility, your schedule, your patients, your practice culture, your own name on the door. And you still had the stability that comes from operating in an established, respected, essential industry with a repeatable business model. That's a rare combination, and it didn't go unnoticed. For nearly a decade, from 2013 to 2021, US News & World Report ranked dentist as one of the best jobs in America. The combination of income, work-life balance, job security, and growth potential put it at or near the top of the list every single year. That's not an accident. That's a profession that had things figured out, and they earned it. Building a successful private dental practice required real business acumen. You had to manage staff, control overhead, market locally, retain patients, build community trust. Dentists aren't just clinicians, they are entrepreneurs whether they thought of themselves that way or not. The model worked so well for so long that at some point, somewhere in that golden area, the profession stopped asking whether it would continue working. And that's where this story gets more complicated. You probably know the story of the frog in boiling water. Raise the temperature slowly enough and the frog never jumps. That's exactly what happened in the dental industry. There's no single moment where everything changes. Instead, it's a series of small shifts, each one manageable on its own, but that compound quietly over the years until one day you look up and the world looks very different than it did. To understand how we got here, we need to go back even further. Back to the beginning, because the forces that are squeezing private practices today were set in motion long before any dentist currently in practice was even born. Early dentistry was the responsibility of the village barber. Surgery was considered beneath the medical profession at the time, so the logic was simple. This guy can cut hair, he can pull out your teeth and amputate your limbs. These barber surgeons established themselves as independent businesses integral to their communities across 12th and 13th century Europe. By the mid-18th century, surgical responsibility had finally shifted fully to physicians. Medical education was formalizing, the first medical college in the United States was founded, and several more followed by the early 19th century. But in 1840, when a group of dentists tried to get dentistry included in a medical school curriculum, the University of Maryland said no. They didn't consider it a serious enough discipline. So, these dentists did something remarkable. They started their own school, the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery. This was the first dental school in the world. And that decision planted the seed for everything that followed. Dentistry built its own identity, its own institutions, its own professional infrastructure, completely independent from the rest of medicine. Following the path of the barber surgeon, dentists became sole practitioner businesses integral to American community life. And for a long time, that independence was a feature, not a bug. It is what gave dentists autonomy to build the private practice model that made the profession so successful. But independence from medicine also meant independence from medicine's infrastructure. When employer-sponsored health insurance became mainstream after World War II, medical care got bundled together. Hospitals, physicians, specialists all folded into a system where insurance became the primary payment mechanism and the economic driver. Dental stayed in its own lane, but decided to flirt with the insurance model. It was similar to medical insurance in a lot of ways, but dentists maintained their independence from it, as they've always done. The problem is that dental insurance was never designed as catastrophic protection. It was designed as a workplace perk with low annual maximums, usually around $1,500. But the crazy part is, those maximums haven't changed meaningfully in the last 50 years. A $1,500 annual maximum in 1975 had real purchasing power, but today that same amount barely covers a crown. So the insurance infrastructure dental had built itself around was always going to have a ceiling. The profession just hit that ceiling slowly enough that nobody panicked. And while that ceiling approached, three forces were building in the background. By the early 2020s, all three hit at once. Force 1, competition got serious. For most of dentistry's history, your competition was the practice down the street. Another dentist, roughly the same model, roughly the same patient base. As of 2026, there are 160,000 general dentists serving 340 million Americans. That's over 2,000 people per dentist. The demand has never really been the problem, but DSOs changed the game. DSOs are corporate dental chains. They have scale, multiple locations, centralized operations, massive marketing budgets, and negotiating leverage with insurance companies that a solo practitioner simply cannot match. These DSOs looked at the existing dental marketing playbook, which was compete on Google visibility, accept as many insurance plans as possible, and prioritize volume, and realized this is a game we can win. So they built their entire business model exactly for that game. They let go of the village barber surgeon model and its associated strengths and poured money into systematizing dentistry and outspending the private practice dentists unlucky enough to be in their clinic's proximity. And it wasn't only DSOs that increased competitions, specialists also started going direct to consumer. Orthodontists started running Instagram ads, implant centers targeting patients directly, bypassing the general dentist referral entirely. Force number 2, costs kept climbing. The COVID pandemic set off a meteoric rise in hygienist wages. Equipment, materials, supplies, all up in cost. The operational cost of running a private practice has increased 5 to 7% annually for years. And there's a ceiling to how hard you can work to absorb those rising costs. Most dentists have hit that ceiling, and their own paychecks have had to make up the difference. Dentists are now the only profession across any medically related industry whose salaries have actually dropped over the last 5 years, and that's without accounting for anything to do with inflation. And the third force is insurance has stopped keeping pace. While overhead continues to climb, PPO reimbursement rates have essentially stayed flat. 0 to 2% increases, if that. The gap between what it costs to run a practice and what insurance actually pays keeps widening every single year. One dentist we talked to laid it out plainly. An insurance cleaning costs his practice $51 to perform between labor and supplies. His total reimbursement for that is $54. As the kids say, the math ain't mathin'. Historically, the response to these pressures was pretty straightforward. Just get more patients, run more ads, join more networks. For a while, the volume game worked because the pressure hadn't become acute enough yet. But the problem is, that was just scaling the bigger problem. And then suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, that same career that US News and World Report had ranked in the top 5 for nearly a decade fell to 47th in 2022, then to 70th in 2024. The water had been boiling for years, it just took that long for most private practices to feel any of the pain. Now, here's where I want to be really clear about something. The decline in dentistry isn't because dentists are bad at business. It's not because the profession made some catastrophic mistake. The independent practice model was genuinely brilliant. It worked for a long time because dentists were entrepreneurial enough to make it work. The problem is what happened when it started working really well. When you're at the top of the best jobs list for 9 consecutive years, the pressure to innovate starts to drop. The playbook is clearly working, so why rock the boat? The trap wasn't the independence dentistry built. That independence was the right call, and it still is. The trap was confusing "this is working" with "this will always work." Every successful business model has an expiration date if you don't keep innovating. Dentistry just happened to have a very long time. But even then, here's something that really shocked me. While dentist income dropped 16%, patient spending on premium dental treatments actually went up 47%. Premium implants, veneers, Invisalign, full mouth rehabilitation, patients are spending more money on dentistry than ever before. The money didn't leave dentistry, it just moved. Within a 10-minute drive of the average dental practice, approximately $24 million in premium dental work is performed every single year. That's $2 million a month, $100,000 every single business day. So, where did it go? Insurance companies captured some of it, but the bigger shift is that money flowed toward DSOs and specialist centers, and it moved away from private practices still trying to compete on insurance acceptance and Google rankings and trying to outspend DSOs, trying to attract whoever showed up. The problem is they had nowhere near the budget to win that game. Dentistry is not a market in decline. It's a market that's been badly misread over the past few years. So this is where I come back to June 2025 and the Google update that started all of this exploration for us. What that update actually did was tighten the radius Google used when ranking local businesses on maps. Searches for near me got more local, more neighborhood specific, and less citywide. For most local businesses, that's a problem. Competing in a smaller pool with weak local signals means your visibility drops fast. But for dentists whose real service area is already tiny compared to most businesses, this should have been a huge advantage. Except most dentists weren't seeing the same results we saw for our clients. And that's what made us look harder. What happened for our dentists that wasn't happening across the industry? It became obvious as we dug into things more because Google doesn't just reward proximity. It rewards proximity and relevance and prominence. And the signals that drive relevance and prominence, reviews from real long-term patients that have actual substance, local backlinks, community mentions, a genuine digital footprint built from actually being embedded in a neighborhood, those are exactly the signals a well-run private practice naturally accumulates over time. The problem is a lot of private practices have been leaning away from that because they've been trying to compete with DSOs. DSOs struggle to build those signals. Their model requires scale and standardization, the exact opposite of what drives that deep local trust that a private practice can own. So here's what we kept coming back to. Referrals account for 60% or more of new patients in dentistry. Ever since the barber surgeon days, dentistry has been a game of relationships. But the introduction of insurance and then the rise of digital advertising slowly pulled dentists' attention away from the thing that was actually driving their business. We're now seeing the industry has started drifting away from those relationship advantages and chasing ads and SEO, just as those advantages have become more valuable than they've ever been. The Google algorithm update didn't create this opportunity, it just made it more visible to anyone paying attention. Algorithm updates in December 2025 and February 2026 have further cemented this advantage for private practices. The path forward for private practice dentists isn't to try and outspend DSOs on ads. It's not to join more insurance networks. It's to systematically leverage the structural advantages private practices have always had but rarely built around intentionally. Things like community trust, doctor continuity, multi-generational relationships, the ability to be exactly who you are in a way corporate dentistry never can. The opportunity right now is massive precisely because the industry has been so slow to see it. So, what does it actually look like to take advantage of this? The mistake most practices make is starting from the outside in. Build a website, run ads, SEO rankings, join more insurance networks, hope the right patients just show up to your practice. The logic seems sound, especially given what's worked over the last 20 years or so, because obviously more visibility equals more patients. But now it puts you in direct competition with DSOs on their home field. Not only is the competition higher, but you're stuck competing for the patients with the lowest lifetime value, the highest price sensitivity, and the least loyalty. The practices we see winning right now are doing the opposite. They're starting from the inside out. First, getting crystal clear on who they actually are. What makes their practice genuinely different? What kind of patients do they serve best? Not generic quality care for the whole family positioning that every practice is trying to use, but the real specific authentic identity that only they can claim. And then they activate the leverage that exists inside the practice. They look at their existing patient base. There's referral potential in those patients that already come into your practice that most practices leave almost entirely untapped. There's community relationships that have been sitting dormant for years. Next, they build real local authority, not citywide, but the 3 to 5 mile radius that actually matters to that dentist. Owning that micro market so completely that patients choose you before they ever search on Google. That high school football team sponsorship you've been doing on autopilot, well, there's real strategy behind it if you work it intentionally. The local employer who could offer your practice as their dental benefit, that relationship is worth more than any ad campaign or insurance affiliation. And finally, only once you've built that foundation, amplifying it digitally with SEO, website ads, etc. Because digital presence should be built on real identity, and the local authority built in the first few steps doesn't just generate visibility. The whole system works together to attract patients who are looking for exactly what you offer, and repels the ones who are just shopping on price or for insurance coverage. So that's the inside out model. The window to get ahead of this is open right now. The dentists who move on it will look back in 3 years and realize they caught something incredibly early. The ones who keep running the same old playbook will keep wondering why the numbers just keep getting harder. So that's the story. A profession that built something remarkable, an independent business model that worked so well for so long that it stopped needing to evolve only to wake up and find the game had quietly changed around it. But also, and this is a part I want you to hold on to, a profession sitting on top of a new, massive, largely uncaptured opportunity. Right now, in your market, within 10 minutes of your front door. But it's a zero-sum game. The patients spending money on premium dental care are choosing someone. The only question is whether or not that someone is you. At Hopkey, this is what we work on with private practices, helping them build the positioning and the local authority that turns those structural advantages into actual patient flow. If you want to go deeper on what that looks like in practice, there's more on this channel and a link in the description. But honestly, whether or not you work with us, I hope this has changed how you see what's happening in the industry, because the diagnosis matters. You can't fix a problem you haven't correctly identified. The decline is real, but so is the opportunity.